Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Upward Spiral podcast. We are so thrilled to have Dr. Dawn Baker. Dr. Baker is the physician, writer, speaker, and lifestyle design coach behind Practice Balance. She helps high-octane professionals step off the treadmill of achievement, rediscover their true selves, and cultivate a practice of balance that's right for them. She is the author of Lean Out, a professional woman's guide to finding authentic work-life balance, and the host of the Lean Out podcast, which I've had the pleasure of being on, and it was amazing. Dawn is also a certified yoga and meditation instructor who is passionate about off-grid living, homeschooling, fitness, and travel. Dawn, if I missed anything or if you have anything to add, please let me know, but so happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be talking with you guys today.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Welcome.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. So you're doing some amazing things. And I think it's your philosophy, your values, I think they're very much in tune with G&I for sure in terms of developing, as you mentioned, that authentic work-life balance. And I think really speaks home for us. Could you tell us how you got to this point of everything that you're doing right now? What brought you here? What inspired you?
Yeah, I feel like since I started my medical journey, I have come full circle to my original vision, which is really interesting. I definitely got off track along the way, but I was an engineer. I started to want to have a life that required a little more flexibility in workplace. When you're an engineer, you're really pegged to live in certain areas depending on what your area of expertise is. And I crave to have, from doing some travel with rock climbing, I crave to have some job that married science and service. And medicine was not on my radar at all at that point as a 22-year-old to 25-year-old. But I did some shadowing, I did some volunteering, and then I went into medical school. So my original vision was to have more freedom in flexibility of where I can live, what kind of schedule I can follow with work. Then I got into medicine, chose anesthesiology as a field, really loved the variety of the types of patients that I could see. And because I had my engineering background, I was approached by some of the people in my training institution to get into a specific niche area of anesthesiology that involves echocardiography, and it's very engineering heavy and science heavy. And I started doing research in that area. And if I had gone down that area, that path, I would have probably been in the same place that I had been as an engineer in a cubicle where I was stuck
Wow.
living in a very specific place and following a very specific schedule.
Yeah.
So I didn't do that. And we can talk about what really woke me up to not doing that. And now I am living that kind of free life. So I went into bread and butter engineering. I ended up doing a job that I loved at an academic institution, but really was very focused on just clinical work. I had a job that was very clinical at that institution and did not have to do research, didn't have to do different administrative roles or anything like that. It was just very simple. I stayed there for a while until my family decided that we wanted to move. And now we're living an alternative lifestyle on an off-grid property in the mountains. And with that, you can imagine that continuing to practice medicine means doing something unique. So now I am per diem and locum tenens only. So I have to travel to do my clinical anesthesiology work. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm living my life on this homestead, raising chickens, homeschooling my daughter. And then I also do coaching, writing, speaking, doing the podcast, and work to help people live a better work-life balance and a more intentional medical life.
Wow. It's amazing. That's amazing. It's interesting how you went from engineering right into medicine, where a lot of us don't feel like medicine is a career where you can kind of make it your own, right? A lot of times you feel like you're stuck to a hospital. So I
Mhm.
love, you're speaking right to my soul, because I'm with you about just being able, like, breaking out of like what they tell us our career in medicine should look like,
Yeah.
and creating your own kind of life of what you'd like medicine to look like. I follow you on social media. You're very active on social media. Your blogs is amazing. How do you find you're living on the homestead? How do you find that balance between being active on social media and on the internet and all those things, but also just, I guess, disconnecting and finding that kind of balance?
I think it is a constant practice. And that's why I actually named my business Practice Balance so many
Mhm.
years ago. I started with that as the name of my blog. That's the name of my website because, in my mind, it's something that you have to constantly be working on. Just
Yeah.
like we say we practice medicine, we practice yoga. You're never perfect at one of those things. That's how I feel about balance. It's constantly something that you have to be evaluating and looking at. So how do I do it? I just am re rethinking what I'm doing constantly. So,
Mhm.
depending on the season, how busy things are. If it's a time when my daughter is very busy with a particular type of activity, such as she's doing jujitsu, and if she wants to do a competition, then we're going to be doing a little bit more traveling to our nearby town to do practices. And so I have less time to, for example, interview people for the podcast or something like that. If I'm on a work assignment, I let my other non-clinical work just sit. I let it stay there and I don't worry about it not getting done. I'm not really in a hurry to do the
Mhm.
things that I do. And social media is a double-edged sword, as we all know. You can get down that rabbit hole of really wasting a lot of time on social
Mhm.
media. And so you have to be careful and intentional about when you go on there. And I used to post a lot more, but I would say that now I have dialed back a little bit because I just do it when the inspiration strikes me and I don't worry too much about what the metrics look like and
Mhm.
who's following me or how many people are on there or, how many
Yeah.
people commented. I just don't worry about it too much because
Mhm.
that's not why I do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think,
That's great.
when you were telling about how you got to this point, I thought about something that I say this all the time, especially to my students, is that just take a hold of your life and make it what you want, right? I mean, I think that medicine, probably many professions are evolving where you can, you can really, you don't have to, like if you're a physician, work Monday to Saturday all day and, and do that, right? At the end of the day, we spend so much time, really, if we think about it, even if we make it our own, doing these things, right? Our profession and spending our time working. You should really, at least enjoy the week most of the time, I think, regardless of even if you're spending a lot of that time doing your profession, right? Because if you should enjoy it, you should enjoy most of your week. Most of your week shouldn't be terrible and you dread it, and
Mhm.
I've heard some of my friends say the Sunday scaries, right? Where you're worried about Monday morning.
Yes. Oh my
Shouldn't
gosh,
have
yes.
that. Yeah, we shouldn't have it, right? So, I think professions will continue to evolve where you're able to really have that, as you mentioned, again, I love the phrase authentic work-life balance, right?
Mhm.
Where you can really make life what you want it to be.
Right.
So, uh, you mentioned earlier about, we were going to touch on this. I want to make sure we do why, you didn't really go the engineering route.
Yeah. Okay. Well, during my residency, when I started to get really heavy into the perioperative echocardiography area and took on a research project, at the same time that I did that, I felt like I was burning out. I was struggling to wake up in the morning, have enough energy to wake up in the morning. I felt like I had sleep disturbance. I had issues with focus. I had trouble on, we have those shelf exams or, like a mock board exam that you do every year in residency.
Mhm.
I had trouble on the one that I had just taken. I just was having trouble on some of my rotations. And I didn't really know why, but I chalked it up to burnout. Burnout was something that this was like around 2009, 2010. So people were just starting to talk about burnout and make it a public thing that, was raising awareness of that. And I sought a little help with my one of my mentors. She had a husband that was an executive coach. He helped me actually to kind of elucidate things, figure out what was going on. And I ended up taking some time off And it turned out that at that same time, I had lost my period. That was the only medical problem that I had that was like seen in a laboratory report
Right.
or anything like that. And my department and my the program director and the department head were very supportive. Not everybody was supportive at that, at the institution, but they were very supportive of me. And I then went on this diagnostic odyssey, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Why did I have premature menopause or ovarian failure? Because I actually had no hormones in my system. I became very depressed during this time. I had kind of an anhedonic depression, just lost my zest for really anything that I was excited about, the travel, the rock climbing, any of that stuff. The things that I used to really love doing and get up in the morning for. Long story short, I also went on a quest to figure out a lot of things about my mental health, did a meditation retreat, learned about personal development, read several books about mindfulness, started practicing mindfulness during that time. I went back to my residency and I felt better mentally, but physically, I still didn't have my period back. And I happened to see my endocrinologist in the hospital one day, and he was like, "You should really get your head scanned." He's like, "Maybe you have a brain tumor." And I'm like, "I don't have a brain tumor. There's no way I have a brain tumor." Anyway, I ended up going and getting my head scanned, and I did have a brain tumor. And so I had this big health crisis occur to me at that point where I had a very large pituitary adenoma that was blocking my vision. I had subsequent vision tests, and I was actually losing my peripheral vision to a very severe extent, which was probably causing some of my problems on my rotations that had to do with doing procedures. And I went, I underwent surgery. It wasn't a tumor that could be shrunk by medicine. It was very large and compressing my optic nerve. So I had major neurologic surgery, stay in the neuro ICU as a resident. And I had some of my supervisors being my physicians, and that just caused a big wake up call in me. It was really the answer I was looking for the period of time before that, where I was trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and I was just in this existential crisis. And then it was like, oh, this is what's wrong with me. And all of a sudden the realization of, well, of course, all these things have been happening to you. And you also prolonged your own diagnosis, because I was too busy to. Someone had recommended that I get an MRI beforehand, and I hadn't gotten it. It had been like months before I actually got it. And so all of that really set off me getting back on my path to my original vision.
Wow. There's so much to unpack there. And two things that I had on my mind was one, taking off time as a resident. How did you come to that decision? Because it's not an easy decision. Anybody in their clinical rotations, you know how much pressure you feel, and to even ask for that time off. And then the other question that I had was just around coming to that diagnosis. What were you, well, I actually answer the first question. I can,
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
So I did take the time off before I even really knew fully what was wrong with me. I knew something was wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have a real medical diagnosis. And yes, that is very awkward to do because
Mm-hmm.
unseen disability or unseen illness is very hard, even for physicians to understand. And you're in a training program, and how do
Right.
you do that? I'm interviewing someone on my podcast coming up pretty soon that also has something like this, an unseen disability, an invisible disability, and talking about just the difficulties of navigating that as a trainee. I am a little bit older because I had been an engineer. I think that that helped a little bit because um, I was a little bit more maybe sure of myself than
Mm-hmm.
if you were 22 or 23
Yeah.
or 24. However, it was still hard. You still feel like you're letting people down. The lucky thing was when I made the decision to do it, I probably I wouldn't have made that decision if I was like on an ICU rotation or something. I don't know that things would have happened the way that they did if that was the time that I had gotten this coaching and had this realization that I should take this time off, and it had these like lab results and saying that I was in menopause or something when I was 35 basically. But I was on a rotation that they wouldn't miss me too much
Mhm.
if I went away from it. So I think
Hello,
that.
everyone. Dr. Foti for this quick commercial break. So, I mentioned it on our last episode. I'm the vice president of NAMI, or the National Alliance on Mental Illness, in Orange County, New York. And this September, specifically on September 1st, we'll be hosting our first ever for Orange County, New York, NAMI Walks, which is a fundraiser to support NAMI Orange County, New York, so we may continue providing mental health resources to our community. So please, I urge you, register for the walk, or if you can donate whatever you can, so we can continue providing these vital and important resources to our Orange County community. Thank you, and we'll return to our regular programming.
When I had surgery too,
Right, of
obviously.
course. How was it
Yeah.
transitioning to, you were attributing it to burnout, you're having all these symptoms, you're like, I'm just burning the candle on both ends, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I have a brain tumor. Like there's actually physically something wrong that's causing
Yeah.
all the issues that you're having.
Well, I had a lot of relief. And I think that's part of having the medical background is that we've all experienced patients where you don't know what to do with them and they have a lot of symptoms and you're like, I can't explain exactly what's happening. And I thought I was one of those people. And then when it was like there's this diagnosis, I was like, "Oh, thank God." Like this is something
Yes,
we could
brain
fix.
tumor.
Hopefully,
Yes,
it's a little scary. I had never
yes.
undergone surgery or anything, but like and it's major surgery, but like it still is like oh, it's relieving in some ways that there's an organic process that can be dealt with. So I had
Right.
that feeling. And the other thing that really evolved over time was me developing a great sense of self-compassion that I did not have before.
Mm.
I was hating myself when I was in that period of time where I felt like I was burned out and I wasn't meeting the standards of other residents. I wasn't doing well on the shelf exam I was talking about. I was struggling on rotations that involved ultrasound and visualization because I was going blind and all this stuff. I hated myself and I thought
Yeah.
like, why can I not hack it? What is wrong with me? I guess I'm not as smart as I thought I was. I All of that was going through my head.
Wow.
And even though I had looked into the mindfulness stuff and had started practicing it and had started reading, just because you read and you have a realization that it's there doesn't mean that you fully are integrating it into your life yet and
Mhm.
that you believe it. And so I think that getting that diagnosis really helped me to do that.
Well,
Wow.
well, I'm glad you're doing better for sure, and that obviously it turned to a positive turning point in your life after that. But we're really glad that you're doing better from all of that, because I can't even imagine. I know it's became something tangible to hold on to because of everything you were experiencing. But still, obviously, that's a big diagnosis to get. So really glad you're doing better. I
Thanks.
would be remiss not to make this an educational point for my students who are watching right now, because as we saw, Dr. Baker mentioned that she had a pituitary adenoma and her peripheral vision was decreasing from both sides. So, first student to email me why that happened and what that's called, I'll give you a shout out. So we'll see who gets that, and I'll give you
I
a
like
email.
it, Dr.
That's
Foley.
it. Got to make it.
Great.
I got to make it an educational
That's
point.
great.
I do have to say something though, from a standpoint of practicality, there's the textbook and there's practicality.
Mm,
I did not realize my vision loss because it happened
Wow.
so slowly.
mm,
So it wasn't something that really clued me in on what was going on. It was something that I realized after the diagnosis. So I was having trouble with procedures, and I think that is
Okay.
why. But that peripheral loss didn't really hit me until I had visual field testing. And it was so funny because you have the testing, and then all of a sudden you're realizing as you're looking at things
Mhm.
like, oh, yeah, I really can't see that over there.
Mhm.
which I
But
think
Wow.
your
like
mind does tricks.
Yeah.
yeah, I think it highlights too where, you know, it's not always about asking the right questions to a patient. It's about doing the proper physical exam and testing, because sometimes these are things you don't notice, right? Not every patient comes to you with a textbook to say, hey, this is
Right.
what I
Yeah.
have, right?
And a lot of symptoms that I was experiencing are very non-specific.
Mhm.
Having amenorrhea can be attributed to a lot of things. Having depression can be attributed to a lot of things,
Right.
including just situations. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
100%. Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
other thing I had,
Mm.
just as an aside, I had profound fatigue that I could not explain. And when I would, um, it kind of make myself go climbing with my husband. Like I was very into rock climbing. We would take a hike to a climbing area, and even if it was an easy hike or a short hike, I would have to take a nap because I felt so fatigued. And so there was this fatigue level that I didn't really appreciate until later when I could put it all
Mhm.
together.
Yeah.
Wow.
I guess like you're saying, all those symptoms can be attributed to like to stress for working so much, like your
Mhm.
sleep schedule is messed up because you're a resident. All of those things you can say, oh, I'm just under a lot of stress right now. And they're maybe not to that degree, but it just goes to show you that like your self-awareness gets impacted by what's going on around you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that term is so important, and it is what I'm always preaching to people now
Mhm.
when I give talks. I talk about self-knowledge and self-awareness. It's a big running theme in my book because I feel like that is the important key to so many things, not just staying healthy, but then also just navigating your own work-life balance, figuring out what you want your career to look like. How do you want to parent? How do you want to, show up for your partners? How all your personal things as well.
Right. And like
Mm.
you said, it's a practice.
No,
It's
go ahead.
not, and it's dynamic and it changes and fluctuates from
Yeah.
time, different seasons of life.
100%. Yeah. And you mentioned your book, and that's why I just wanted to ask, for those who have not read your book or have not listened to your podcast yet, um what does lean out? What does that mean? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I had this idea to do a book for a while, and I could not figure out exactly what I wanted it to look like until I happened to just come across that book, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And I came across it a while after it was made. And I had heard of it, but I hadn't read it. And I think what happened was I maybe saw the TED Talk that prompted her to write the book. And I was like, this is BS. I don't agree with any of this stuff. Like as I'm watching it, I'm like, I don't like this. And so then I was like, I'm going to check out this book. And as I was reading it, yes, I agree with some of her points. I agree that women aren't always as confident as they should be when they're asking for what they want at work, when they're negotiating, or, if they really want to have a particular leadership position or things like that. But her I would say one of her big premises is that you should just go, go, go until something happens. And then if a break, she even has this in her book. If a break is needed, take a break.
Mhm.
And I just look at things in a much more proactive approach because I don't want people to get to where I was, where they have a major health crisis, they're facing divorce, there's some sort of big conflict in their life, a financial crisis or something like that, before they wake up and they say, oh, I need to get more self-aware and I need to dial this back and I need to think about what I'm doing and get more mindful about, all of the things I'm saying yes to. And so I titled the book Lean Out, and there are, to be truthful, other books with that title that have riffed on this Sheryl Sandberg book. But my byline is A Professional Woman's Guide to Finding Authentic Work-Life Balance. And it's really not just for women. In the beginning of the book, I do refute Lean Out, which is more women-centered. And my
Mhm.
book is one of the only books that talks about the epidemic of infertility among women professionals. Infertility is especially high in female physicians and attorneys, and it just greater than double the general population of women.
Wow.
And we don't exactly know why this is the case, but this is part of impacting our work-life balance because we want everything. We want to have a fulfilling career, but a lot of us want to have a family too, or at least a family type
Yep.
of a relationship. And so this comes into play when you're negotiating time off, when you need that flexibility and stuff. So I address that in the book. However, the second half of the book is really geared toward anyone. it gives a lot of exercises and a lot of inspiration and information for how you can embark on that journey of leaning out for yourself, which really means being in tune with what you really want.
That really speaks to me, and I think, well, one, you mentioned it's for everyone, and for our viewers who don't know, I believe I was the first male
Mhm.
guest on your Lean Out podcast, so I really
Yeah.
appreciated that. That was really great. But the first part you mentioned about infertility, and especially in women, I think is something that really hits home for me and my family. My wife, who was a paralegal for quite some time, you mentioned attorneys as well, struggled for quite a bit with infertility. After we got married and decided to start having kids, she suffered through two miscarriages, and we just understand what was going on, and wound up going to infertility specialist, and went through everything, and she the battles that she went through, I cannot even describe. I don't know how she did it, but eventually through IVF brought us our two wonderful children, who were just the biggest joys of my life. So it speaks home to me, and how you know she very much values her independence, and she's such a hard worker, but she also valued wanting to have a family, and she did whatever she could to have that as well. So yeah, that definitely resonates with me. So I'm glad that, I'm sure others are saying the same thing I am right now, right? That they've read your book or listened to your podcast. If not, please go do that. Whoever's watching it hasn't yet. But I'm sure you've touched many with your book and everything you're sharing on your podcast and social.
Thank you.
Hmm. Yeah.
Very important. So it really hit home for me. Just recently, I've been feeling like, you go through medical school, then you go through residency, then you go through fellowship, and you keep like pushing the target out where you're like, keep going,
Mhm.
got to do this. I got to check off another box, got to keep going. And Mike, you were talking about those Sunday scaries. And recently, within the last year, I started to have that again. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, I thought this was going to end once I'm done with my training, right? Because the training, you're like, I need to get through this. Like, I just need to get through it. And once it's done, magical things will happen. And I kept experiencing that. And that's really what caused me to really make that shift and decide to open my own practice. And I'm completely remote now and make those changes because I really resonate. I want to be in control of my schedule. I don't want to be tied to a building or tied to a hospital, or I like that flexibility. And I'm recently been trying to lean in where they talk about masculine versus feminine, right? Where the masculine is more driving towards things, it's action, it's continually going towards something, where the feminine is just like kind of allowing things to happen and allowing things to fall into place. And it's funny when you do that, you take a step back. It's funny how they kind of always do work out when you're not like, oh, strangling things into focus. In your life, what has been your experience with that, with like driving aggressively forward versus kind of, I guess, leaning back, leaning out?
Yeah, the way that I think about what you're talking about, and I may have even written something about this at some point on my blog. There's a lot of articles on there,
Mm-hmm.
but is resistance versus acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're resisting something happening or you really want a certain outcome versus just accepting what is and what happens. So how do I deal with that? I think that I have been able through the years, consistent practice, to develop mindfulness, to be able to be aware of that happening in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
It still comes, but I can spot it. I can
Mm-hmm.
see it and be like, all right, I am resisting this and I need to just let go.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it in coaching clients all the time. And something that you just mentioned as well, with the idea of always having something that you're working towards. I had a client recently who is a new attending, maybe like a year out or so, and come to me just feeling not fulfilled, wanting to change some things about her work-life balance, but also at the same time, you can change your circumstance, but you can also and or change your thoughts about your certain circumstance that
Right.
you're in. And so she had feelings of being unfulfilled. And so we had to go through and figure out, like, is this not meeting what your expectations are? How can you let go of what your expectations were and see what is now in front of you? And so I like to do, one of the main things I do with people is have them go through an exercise of figuring out what their core values are. It's super important. It will help you to have a driving force of figuring out why you want what you want, why you are resisting or feeling like you want something a certain way. And then also it can help with your decisions in deciding, like, am I living my values the way I want to, and is there something that I need to do to get closer to being more in alignment with my values
Right.
regarding like work schedule or something
Yeah,
like that.
absolutely. And I guess just saying yes or no to things, right? If it's either aligned with your values, and if it's not, it makes it easy to say, oh, this is not aligned with what's important to me, what my values are at this point. And that
Yes,
sounds
yes, and
great.
just seeing that realization too of being like, why am I doing this? Why am I saying
Mhm.
yes to this?
It made me also think of, when they speak about chasing happiness, right? There's that famous saying about that where if happiness is always a goal, then you're never going to be happy, right? So you have to worry about your happiness in the present. Your goal should be a present moment happiness, right? What can I do right now? And then everything else I think comes, right? Once, like you both mentioned, which is so true, aligning your values with what you're looking for in your life, just follow that kind of intuition and that gut feeling, right? And then I think that removes a lot of that. But yeah, I think they say planning is a fool's errand, right? You just have to kind of just let life happen.
Well, I think that you have to, again, to use this term, strike a balance, but you have to strike a balance between living in the present, but having an idea of a plan that is flexible. So you
Mhm.
can be planning and say, my vision is this because my values are this way. And so I want to get my, say, work-life balance to look a certain way. I want to have, a 4-day work week, or I want to, get to this point where I have my own practice and it looks like this. And those are great things to think about, but you also don't have to be rushing to get to that place.
Mhm.
You need to be, accepting with where you are right now.
Absolutely. I think in training, like your residency, it's going to take 3 years, it's going to take 4 years, and that you already know you're going to be there for that amount of time. It's easy to get wrapped up in like, I need to do this, like have the website, everything done yesterday. Like it should have been done already. And then you're constantly being like, oh. So I think it's 100% that just being flexible with the planning. They say we're in control of the input, right? And God or the universe is in control of the outcome, and like being disconnected from the outcome, just allowing it to kind of fall into place because it may just end up being better than you even imagined it to be. You just kind of
Yeah,
let go a little bit.
yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Amazing. As we wrap up, Dawn, is there anything else you wanted to let our viewers know? And also just how they can reach you and anything else you wanted to mention?
Well, I would love it if you're interested in the things that we've been talking about. If you go check out my website and podcast, that's a really good way to get a flavor for the things that I talk about in the book. The book is available on Amazon. Again, it's called Lean Out, A Professional Woman's Guide to Finding Authentic Work-Life Balance. The podcast is called Lean Out, and there are a couple of other Lean Outs too, but you can look up my name. And I usually post either an interview or a solo cast weekly. Occasionally, I'll take a week or two off, especially when I'm working on my clinical work and I don't have the bandwidth to do it, like we were talking about in the very
Yeah.
beginning of this episode. My website is called practicebalance.com. There are 10 years of articles on there about all things self-development, burnout prevention, mindset, all sorts of topics. And there's a way to inquire on there about coaching services if you're interested in that. And if you just want to subscribe to my newsletter, there's a purple box on my website where you can put your email in and you will get the free core values exercise that I tend to run with all of my clients. So I hope that you will enjoy that and find that valuable.
Yeah, and I'll
It
put
sounds
the
so valuable.
yeah. I'm gonna put the
Mhm.
links to all of that in the show notes, so that'll all be there for everyone to access. Wow, Dawn,
Great.
thank you so much for coming on. This
Thank
was
you.
really, really insightful, and you've had a profound journey already thus far, and I'm excited to see what's next for you, and we just appreciate you sharing all of that with us and our viewers. G, anything you got to say?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work. You're well into this work of really spreading the word and just sharing and changing people's lives. So thank you for the work you're doing and what you've been doing too.
Oh, thank you guys so much. And thanks for having me on your show. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. And that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone.